Hello there and welcome to another gentle journey with the Sleepy Scientist, where curiosity wraps itself in comfort and the mysteries of our world unfold like a soft blanket on a quiet evening. Tonight we're embarking on something a little different, a wandering exploration through some of the most peculiar, fascinating, and downright mysterious corners of science that most people never hear about. Have you ever wondered about the sounds that no one can explain? The frequencies that seem to come from nowhere, detected by our most sensitive instruments, yet their origins remain as elusive as morning mist. Or perhaps you've pondered the strange behaviors of materials that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics, yet there they are, quietly defying our expectations in laboratories around the world. As you settle in tonight, wherever you might be listening from, whatever time it is in your corner of the world, I invite you to let your mind drift gently through these scientific puzzles. Some are ancient mysteries that have puzzled thinkers for centuries. Others are brand new enigmas discovered just in the past few years, fresh questions that remind us how much we still don't know about the universe we inhabit. Before we begin our quiet expedition, I'd love to know, are you tucked into bed, perhaps with a cup of tea slowly cooling on your nightstand? Are you curled up in a favorite chair as the world outside settles into evening? Or maybe you're walking under stars, with the soft glow of your device providing the only light. Wherever you are, whatever brings you here tonight, you're exactly where you need to be. If you find comfort in these gentle explorations, if the wonder of the unknown helps ease your mind toward rest, I'd be deeply grateful if you'd consider giving this video a quiet thumbs up, or perhaps subscribing to join our little community of curious souls. It helps more people discover this peaceful corner of the internet where science meets serenity. Now I do hope this journey isn't so intriguing that it keeps you awake, though if it does, well, at least you'll drift off with your mind full of fascinating mysteries. Sometimes the best sleep comes after we've allowed ourselves to wonder about the vast, strange, beautiful world we're part of. Tonight's tale begins with a sound, or rather a frequency, something that should have been impossible to detect, yet there it was, humming quietly through the most sophisticated listening devices humanity has ever built. It was discovered quite by accident, as many of the most important scientific mysteries are, by a researcher who was looking for something else entirely. The year was 2019, and Dr. Elena Vasquez was hunched over her computer in a small laboratory in the mountains of Chile, surrounded by the soft whir of cooling fans and the gentle click of data processing. She was supposed to be analyzing gravitational wave signals, those tiny ripples in space-time created when massive objects like black holes collide billions of light-years away. But instead, buried in the background noise of her instruments, she kept finding something else, something that had no business being there. It was a frequency so low, so subtle, that it sat just at the edge of detection. Most researchers would have dismissed it as equipment error, cosmic background radiation, or perhaps the electronic hum of nearby machinery. But Elena had spent years learning to listen to the universe's whispers, and this particular whisper felt different. The frequency appeared in every dataset, constant as a heartbeat, regular as breathing. It seemed to pulse through the very fabric of space itself, a gentle rhythm that connected observations from Chile to Japan to Louisiana. No matter which gravitational wave detector was listening, there it was, this mysterious hum that defied explanation. What Elena didn't know that quiet evening in the mountains was that she had stumbled upon something that would lead her down a rabbit hole of scientific mysteries, each one stranger than the last. This single, inexplicable frequency would become the thread that connected some of the most puzzling phenomena in modern science, from materials that remember things they've never experienced, to quantum effects that seem to reach across impossible distances, to biological systems that shouldn't work, according to everything we know about physics. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's slow down, take a breath, and begin at the beginning. Because sometimes the most profound journeys start with the simplest questions. What is that sound? Where is it coming from? And why does it seem to be connected to mysteries we never imagined possible? As we settle into this story together, imagine you're sitting beside Elena in that mountain laboratory, surrounded by the gentle hum of instruments, listening to the cosmos. The night is clear and quiet, the stars above are brilliant, and somewhere in the darkness, the universe is humming a tune that no one quite understands. Are you ready? Let's listen together and see where this mysterious frequency takes us. The Atacama Desert stretches endlessly in all directions from the LIGO Chile facility, a landscape so stark and beautiful, it could belong to another planet. At an altitude of 4,200 meters above sea level, the air is thin and crystal clear, perfect for the delicate work of listening to the universe. It's here, in this remote corner of the Andes, that humanity has built one of its most sensitive instruments, a machine capable of detecting gravitational waves, the faintest ripples in the fabric of space-time itself. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working at this facility for 3 years, and she never tired of the morning ritual, arriving before dawn, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink, then settling into the quiet, climate-controlled environment of the control room where the real magic happened. The building itself was unremarkable, a collection of concrete and steel structures connected by covered walkways, designed more for function than beauty. But inside, it housed some of the most sophisticated technology humanity had ever created. The gravitational wave detector consisted of two 4-kilometer arms, extending at perfect right angles from a central station. Each arm contained a laser interferometer system, so sensitive it could measure changes in distance smaller than 1/10,000th the width of a proton. When gravitational waves passed through Earth, they would stretch and compress space-time itself, causing infinitesimal changes in the length of these arms, changes that the lasers could detect. Elena's job was to sift through the data these instruments collected, looking for the characteristic signatures of cosmic collisions, the final moments when two black holes spiral into each other, or when neutron stars merge in spectacular explosions that forge the heaviest elements in the universe. It was detective work on a cosmic scale, requiring patience, intuition, and an almost mystical ability to recognize patterns in what looked like random noise. On this particular morning, in March 2019, Elena was analyzing data from the previous night's observations. The global network of gravitational wave detectors had been running continuously for months, and the accumulation of data was staggering. Every second, the instruments produced gigabytes of information, a constant stream of numbers that encoded the subtle vibrations of space-time itself. She had been working for about 2 hours when she noticed it, a small persistent anomaly in the background signal. At first she assumed it was instrumental noise, perhaps a vibration from nearby traffic, seismic activity, or even the building's air conditioning system. Gravitational wave detection was notoriously sensitive to environmental disturbances. A truck passing on a road 50 kilometers away could register as a blip in the data, but as Elena examined the signal more closely, she realized this wasn't random noise. It was too regular, too consistent. The frequency was approximately 0.003 Hz, one complete cycle every 5.5 minutes. It appeared as a gentle oscillation in the baseline readings, rising and falling with the rhythm of a slow cosmic breath. What made it even more intriguing was its consistency across different detectors. Elena quickly pulled up data from LIGO Hanford in Washington State and LIGO Livingston in Louisiana. There it was again, the same frequency, the same amplitude, perfectly synchronized despite the thousands of kilometers separating the facilities. She checked the Virgo detector in Italy and Kegra in Japan. The signal was everywhere, threading through every gravitational wave observatory on Earth like a whispered secret. Elena leaned back in her chair, staring at the rhythmic pattern on her screen. In 15 years of studying gravitational waves, she had never seen anything like this. The signal was far too weak to be a gravitational wave from any known astrophysical source, yet it was too coherent and widespread to be instrumental noise. It seemed to permeate the entire planet, a subtle vibration that existed just at the threshold of detection. She spent the rest of that day running diagnostics, checking calibrations, and searching through months of archived data. The signal was always there, constant as a heartbeat. Sometimes it was stronger, sometimes weaker, but it never disappeared entirely. It was as if the Earth itself, or perhaps space itself, was humming an infinitely patient tune. That evening, as the sun set over the Atacama Desert, Elena finally allowed herself to consider the impossible. She might have discovered something entirely new, something that didn't fit into any of the established categories of cosmic phenomena. The frequency was too low to be electromagnetic radiation, too persistent to be a gravitational wave, too widespread to be terrestrial in origin. It existed, in a strange liminal space between known physics, a mystery hiding in plain sight. She decided to keep her discovery quiet for the moment. In the scientific community, extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence, and she had learned to be cautious about preliminary findings. Too many careers had been damaged by premature announcements of revolutionary discoveries that later turned out to be experimental errors or misinterpreted data. Instead, Elena began what would become a months-long investigation into the nature of this mysterious signal. She started by creating a detailed log of its behavior, noting subtle variations in amplitude and phase. She correlated it with solar activity, lunar cycles, seasonal changes, and planetary alignments. She examined whether it might be connected to ocean tides, atmospheric pressure, or seismic activity. The more data she collected, the stranger the signal became. It seemed to be stronger during certain phases of the moon, though the correlation wasn't perfect. It appeared to fluctuate slightly with the seasons, growing more pronounced during the autumn and winter months. Most puzzling of all, it occasionally exhibited sudden brief increases in intensity that lasted anywhere from a few minutes to several hours, then returned to its baseline level with no apparent trigger. Elena's investigation led her deep into the literature on low-frequency phenomena. She read papers on infrasound, sound waves below the threshold of human hearing that can travel vast distances through the atmosphere. She studied research on micropulsations in Earth's magnetic field, Schumann resonances in the ionosphere, and gravitational effects from distant astronomical objects. But nothing she found could explain the signal. Infrasound typically had different frequency characteristics and didn't appear simultaneously in gravitational wave detectors worldwide. Magnetic field variations would affect different types of instruments, not the laser interferometers used to detect gravitational waves. Known astronomical sources either produced much higher frequency signals or would create detectable gravitational wave signatures distinct from what Elena was observing. As autumn turned to winter, Elena realized she was dealing with something unprecedented. The signal didn't fit into any established category of natural phenomena. It was like discovering a new color, or finding a musical note that existed between the standard pitches. It challenged the very foundations of how she understood the world to work. The breakthrough came in December, during a conversation with Dr. Marcus Chen, a quantum physicist visiting from MIT. Elena had decided to share her findings with a small group of trusted colleagues, and Marcus was immediately intrigued by the frequency's characteristics. "You know," he said, studying Elena's data visualization, "this reminds me of something we've been seeing in our quantum coherence experiments. We've been working with materials that exhibit what we call memory effects, substances that seem to retain information about previous states, even after being completely reset." Marcus went on to explain that his research group had been studying crystalline structures that, when subjected to specific electromagnetic fields, would spontaneously organize themselves in patterns that seemed to reflect exposures that had happened weeks or months earlier. It was as if the materials possessed some form of molecular memory that transcended conventional understanding of how information could be stored and retrieved in physical systems. "The really strange part," Marcus continued, "is that we've detected a background oscillation in these memory effects. The patterns seem to strengthen and weaken in regular cycles, almost as if they're being synchronized by some external influence." Elena felt a chill of excitement. "What's the frequency of these cycles?" Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his notes. "Approximately 0.003 Hz. One complete cycle every 5.5 minutes or so." The two scientists stared at each other in silence. Elena's mysterious gravitational wave background signal was somehow connected to quantum memory effects in materials half a world away. The implications were staggering. If the same frequency was influencing both space-time detectors and quantum systems, it suggested the existence of some fundamental field or force that physics had not yet identified. That night, as Elena walked back to her small apartment in the nearby town of San Pedro de Atacama, she looked up at the brilliant stars scattered across the desert sky. Somewhere out there, or perhaps right here around her, an unknown force was pulsing through reality itself, connecting phenomena that should have been completely unrelated. The universe, it seemed, still held secrets that human science was only beginning to glimpse. She had no idea that this discovery would lead her on a journey through some of the strangest corners of scientific research, a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the nature of reality itself. The frequency was just the beginning, the first thread in a tapestry of mysteries that would take her from the mountains of Chile to laboratories in Tokyo, from ancient caves in Hungary to cutting-edge research facilities in Switzerland. But that's a story for the hours ahead. For now, as Elena fell asleep to the gentle whisper of wind through the desert landscape, the mysterious frequency continued its patient pulse through the fabric of existence, connecting worlds and phenomena in ways that no one yet understood. The universe was humming its secret song, and Elena Vasquez had just learned to listen. 3 weeks after Elena's conversation with Marcus, her phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Chilean time. The caller ID showed an international number with a Tokyo area code. Despite the ungodly hour, Elena answered immediately. She had learned that interesting scientific discoveries didn't respect time zones. Dr. Vasquez, the voice was clear despite the distance, with a slight Japanese accent. This is Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the University of Tokyo. I hope I haven't woken you, but I believe we may have found something connected to your frequency. Elena sat up in bed, instantly alert. Word of her discovery had begun spreading through informal networks of physicists and astronomers, shared in conference hallway conversations and late-night emails between colleagues. She had expected some interest, but calls at 4 a.m. were unusual even in the enthusiastic world of scientific collaboration. What kind of connection? She asked, reaching for the notebook she kept beside her bed for exactly these kinds of calls. We've been studying what we call impossible materials, substances that shouldn't be able to exist according to standard materials science but somehow do. About 6 months ago, we created a crystalline structure with a negative refractive index that appears to bend light backward through time. Not literally, of course, but the mathematical models suggest that photons entering the material emerge before they should, as if they're taking shortcuts through space-time. Elena was intrigued but puzzled. That sounds fascinating, but I'm not sure I see the connection to gravitational waves. The connection is in the timing, Dr. Tanaka continued. The temporal distortion effects in our material fluctuate in regular cycles. We initially thought it was equipment error, but the pattern is too consistent. The effect strengthens and weakens with a period of approximately 333 seconds. Elena's breath caught. 333 seconds, exactly 5.5 minutes, the same period as her mysterious frequency. There's more, Dr. Tanaka said. We've been in contact with research groups in London, Berlin, and Sao Paulo who are working with similar exotic materials. They're all reporting the same cyclical variations. Whatever is causing your gravitational wave background signal seems to be influencing quantum-scale phenomena in laboratories around the world. Over the next hour, Dr. Tanaka shared details of his research that sounded like science fiction. His team had created materials with properties that challenged fundamental assumptions about how matter and energy interact. Some crystals appeared to store more energy than they received. Others exhibited thermal properties that violated the second law of thermodynamics, becoming cooler when heat was applied. Most intriguing were the materials that seemed to respond to information rather than energy.
These crystalline structures would rearrange their atomic configurations based on data patterns fed into computers connected to the laboratory, not physically connected, but simply present in the same building. It was as if the materials could somehow sense the flow of information in their environment and adapt accordingly. We call them responsive materials, Dr. Tanaka explained. They appear to be sensitive to abstract patterns in their surroundings. Change the algorithm running on a computer in the next room, and the crystal structure shifts to match the mathematical relationships in the code. Elena found herself scribbling notes furiously, trying to capture not just the technical details but the broader implications. If materials could respond to information patterns and if these responses fluctuated in sync with her gravitational wave signal, it suggested something unprecedented, a field or force that could influence both the fabric of space-time and the organization of matter at the quantum level. Have you detected any correlation with astronomical events? Elena asked. Solar flares, planetary alignments, anything that might originate outside Earth. That's what makes this so puzzling, Dr. Tanaka replied. We've looked for correlations with everything: solar activity, cosmic ray intensity, magnetic field variations, even gravitational effects from Jupiter and Saturn. The signal seems to be independent of all known external influences. After the call ended, Elena spent the rest of the night reading papers that Dr. Tanaka had sent her. The research described a world of materials that behaved more like living systems than inert matter. Crystals that learned from experience, metals that remembered previous configurations, polymers that seemed to anticipate changes in their environment. One paper particularly caught her attention. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute in Germany had created what they called precognitive materials, substances that would begin changing their properties several minutes before external conditions actually shifted. If you were about to change the temperature in a laboratory, these materials would start adjusting their structure before the heating or cooling system even turned on. The paper's authors admitted they had no theoretical framework to explain this phenomenon. The materials seemed to be sensitive to future states, which violated causality as conventionally understood. Yet the effect was repeatable and measurable, documented across multiple laboratory environments with different teams of researchers. Elena noticed that the precognitive effects also fluctuated with a 333-second period. The material's apparent ability to sense future changes was strongest at regular intervals, then faded to barely detectable levels before building up again. The timing matched her gravitational wave signal perfectly. She began to see a pattern emerging. Around the world, researchers were discovering phenomena that challenged established physics, and many of these phenomena shared the same mysterious rhythm. It was as if reality itself was pulsing, creating windows of opportunity when the normal rules of science became more flexible.
The next morning, Elena decided to expand her investigation. She created a secure online forum for researchers who had detected unusual periodic phenomena in their experiments. Within a week, she had dozens of participants sharing data from fields as diverse as neuroscience, materials science, quantum computing, and even archaeology. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Cambridge University reported that her neuroscience lab had detected 333-second cycles in brain activity patterns of subjects during deep meditation. The cycles appeared spontaneously, without any external stimulus, and occurred only in individuals who had been meditating for more than 5 years. Professor Antonio Reyes from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid shared data from his archaeological research in Spanish caves. His team had been using ground-penetrating radar to map underground chambers when they noticed that their instruments detected structural variations in the rock formations that followed regular timing patterns. Ancient limestone caves seemed to have been carved by water flows that pulsed with the same 333-second period, as if some force had been modulating underground water systems for thousands of years. Most intriguing was a report from Dr. Lisa Park, a quantum computing researcher at IBM. Her team had been working on quantum entanglement experiments, when they discovered that entangled particles exhibited stronger correlations during specific time windows. These windows of enhanced quantum coherence lasted about 15 minutes and occurred every 5.5 minutes, exactly matching Elena's gravitational wave signal. It's as if quantum entanglement becomes easier during certain phases of this cycle, Dr. Park explained during a video conference call. Particles that should lose their entangled state within microseconds maintain coherence for minutes or even hours when the effect is at its peak. Elena found herself at the center of an informal network of scientists who were all encountering variations of the same mystery. Each researcher had discovered phenomena that shouldn't exist according to established physics, yet the phenomena were real, measurable, and apparently connected by this mysterious 333-second rhythm. The implications were staggering. If a single unknown field or force could influence gravitational wave detectors, quantum materials, brain activity, geological formations, and particle entanglement, it suggested that human understanding of reality was far more incomplete than anyone had imagined. Elena started calling it the coherence field, a hypothetical influence that seemed to create moments when the normal barriers between different aspects of reality became more permeable. During peak phases of the cycle, materials could store impossible amounts of energy. Particles could maintain quantum coherence over macroscopic distances, and even human consciousness seemed to enter altered states more readily. But what was causing this field? Where did it originate? And why had science never detected it before? The answer would come from an unexpected source, a retired physicist in Hungary, who had been quietly working on problems that mainstream science had forgotten, hidden away in caves that had been carved by the same mysterious force that was now pulsing through Elena's gravitational wave detectors. As winter deepened in the Atacama Desert, Elena prepared for the next phase of her investigation. She had requests for collaboration from researchers on 6 continents, data suggesting that reality itself might be more fluid than anyone had suspected, and a growing conviction that she was on the verge of a discovery that would change how humanity understood the universe. The mysterious frequency continued its patient pulse, connecting phenomena across scales from the quantum to the cosmic, weaving together a story that no single scientific discipline could tell alone. Elena was about to learn that some mysteries require not just new theories, but entirely new ways of thinking about the relationship between consciousness, matter, and the hidden structures of reality itself. But first, she needed to understand what an elderly physicist in the caves of Hungary had discovered about the nature of time, memory, and the strange mathematics that seemed to govern them both. Dr. Laszlo Kovacs had been effectively invisible to the mainstream physics community for 23 years, ever since he published a paper suggesting that time might not be linear, a paper that was politely ignored by peer reviewers and quietly forgotten by his colleagues at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Rather than fight the academic establishment, Laszlo had simply disappeared into the Buda Hills, where he continued his research in a network of caves that he had been exploring since childhood. It was Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Cambridge who first mentioned Laszlo to Elena during one of their video conferences in February 2020. Sarah had been following up on her discovery that meditation-induced brain states synchronized with the 333-second cycle, and her research had led her to papers on consciousness and temporal perception that cited Laszlo's work. "He's completely outside the mainstream," Sarah explained, "but his mathematical models for nonlinear time flow are elegant and surprisingly predictive. He's been working alone for decades, apparently using some kind of underground laboratory. Most physicists think he's a harmless eccentric, but I've read his papers, and they're brilliant. Just too far outside conventional thinking to get serious attention." Elena was intrigued. She had learned to pay attention to researchers who worked at the margins of established science, particularly when their work connected to her growing understanding of the coherence field. If Laszlo had been studying nonlinear time for decades, he might have insights into the temporal aspects of the mysterious 333-second cycle. Finding Laszlo proved more difficult than expected. He had no official academic affiliation, no listed phone number, and no email address in any university directory. Elena finally tracked him down through a Hungarian spelunking society, which provided contact information for the professor who studies the singing caves. The phone conversation that followed was unlike any Elena had experienced in her scientific career. Laszlo spoke English with an old-world formality that somehow made even the most outlandish ideas sound reasonable. He explained that he had been studying what he called temporal currents for over 3 decades, using the acoustical properties of underground chambers to detect variations in the flow of time itself. "You must understand, Dr. Vasquez," Laszlo said in his careful, precise English, "that time is not the simple, uniform progression that physics assumes. Time has texture, rhythm, depth. It flows like water through landscape, sometimes straight and swift, sometimes curved and slow, sometimes pooling in eddies that create extraordinary effects." He explained that certain geological formations acted as natural resonators for temporal variations, much like organ pipes amplify specific musical frequencies. The caves in the Buddha Hills contained chambers carved by underground streams over millions of years, creating acoustic spaces that could detect incredibly subtle changes in temporal flow. "I have been listening to time itself," Laszlo continued, "and for the past year, I have detected a new rhythm, a pulse that repeats every 333 seconds. It is unlike anything I have observed before, stronger, more regular, and apparently global in scope." Elena felt the familiar thrill of discovery. Laszlo had independently detected the same 333-second cycle, using methods completely different from gravitational wave detection or quantum materials research. His temporal acoustics approach suggested that the coherence field might be related to variations in the fundamental nature of time itself. "Would it be possible for me to visit your laboratory?" Elena asked. "I think our research might be connected in ways that could be important for both of us." Laszlo was quiet for a long moment. "I rarely have visitors, Dr. Vasquez. My work is unconventional. But yes, I believe it would be beneficial for us to meet. The patterns I am detecting suggest we are approaching a critical juncture, a moment when the normal structures of reality may become more malleable." 3 weeks later, Elena found herself on a plane to Budapest, carrying recording equipment and data drives containing months of gravitational wave measurements. She had no clear idea what she would find in Laszlo's underground laboratory, but her instincts told her this meeting might be crucial to understanding the mystery that had consumed her life for nearly a year. Laszlo met her at Ferenc Liszt International Airport, a tall, thin man in his 70s with silver hair and intensely curious eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a well-maintained but clearly vintage suit and carried himself with the formal courtesy of someone from an earlier era. During the drive through Budapest's winter landscape, he pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the city's history with the detailed knowledge of someone who had lived there all his life. "The caves we will visit," he explained as they wound through the narrow streets of Buda, "were formed during the Pliocene epoch, approximately 3 million years ago. Underground streams carved chambers and passages through limestone and dolomite formations, creating acoustic spaces with remarkable properties. But their most interesting feature is not geological. It is temporal." They parked near a hiking trail that led up into the forested hills overlooking the Danube. Laszlo shouldered a backpack filled with electronic equipment and led Elena along paths that seemed to have been carved by centuries of careful use. After about 20 minutes of walking, they arrived at what appeared to be a natural rock formation, but Laszlo revealed a carefully concealed entrance to an underground passage. "The primary laboratory is about 200 meters inside the hill," he explained, switching on a LED headlamp. "The chambers I use were naturally formed, but I have added acoustic equipment and environmental controls to create optimal conditions for temporal detection." The passage was narrow but well maintained, with wooden supports and handrails that suggested decades of careful engineering. As they descended, Elena noticed that the rock walls showed evidence of water erosion in complex swirling patterns. The limestone had been carved by flowing water over geological time, creating surfaces that curved and twisted like frozen waves. After several minutes of walking, the passage opened into a large chamber that took Elena's breath away. The cave was approximately the size of a concert hall, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. But what made it extraordinary was the equipment that Laszlo had installed throughout the space. Dozens of sensitive microphones were positioned at precise intervals along the chamber walls, connected by carefully routed cables to banks of recording and analysis equipment. Multiple computer screens displayed real-time acoustic data, showing waveform patterns that fluctuated in complex rhythmic cycles. The entire chamber hummed with the quiet electronics of a sophisticated scientific laboratory. "Welcome to my temporal listening post," Laszlo said with obvious pride. "I have been perfecting this installation for over 20 years. The natural acoustics of this chamber, combined with precision instrumentation, allow me to detect variations in temporal flow that would be impossible to measure using conventional methods." Elena walked slowly around the chamber, examining the equipment and trying to understand how Laszlo's approach worked. "How do you detect temporal variations using sound?" she asked. Laszlo's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Sound waves are temporal phenomena. They exist in time as much as in space. When the flow of time varies, even minutely, it affects the propagation characteristics of acoustic waves. By analyzing the precise timing relationships between sounds generated at different points in the chamber, I can detect changes in temporal flow that occur over periods of seconds, minutes, or even hours." He led Elena to a central console, where multiple data streams converged. The screens showed acoustic patterns that looked almost like musical notation, complex waveforms that rose and fell in intricate harmonies. But Elena could see underlying rhythms that repeated every 333 seconds, exactly matching her gravitational wave observations. "The pattern you see here," Laszlo said, pointing to a particularly clear oscillation, "represents what I call a temporal current, a systematic variation in the rate at which time flows in this location. During peak phases of the cycle, time moves slightly faster than average. During minimum phases, it slows down imperceptibly." Elena studied the data displays, fascinated by the implications. "But if time is flowing at different rates, shouldn't that affect all physical processes equally? How can we detect it?" "Ah," Laszlo smiled. "That is the key insight. Most physical processes are indeed affected equally, which is why temporal variations are so difficult to detect. But certain phenomena, particularly those involving quantum coherence, gravitational effects, and consciousness, seem to be sensitive to the absolute rate of temporal flow, not just relative rates." He pulled up additional data screens showing correlations between the acoustic temporal measurements and various other phenomena. Elena was amazed to see connections to solar activity, magnetic field variations, and even patterns in global human behavior that had been documented by social scientists. "The coherence field that you have discovered through gravitational wave detection," Laszlo continued, "appears to be related to what I call temporal elasticity, the degree to which the flow of time can vary from its baseline rate. During periods of high temporal elasticity, reality becomes more flexible. Physical laws that are normally absolute become probabilistic. Quantum effects become macroscopic. Consciousness can access states that are usually inaccessible." Elena spent the next 3 days in Laszlo's underground laboratory, learning about his decades of research into temporal phenomena. She discovered that he had been documenting unusual events that correlated with peaks in temporal elasticity, instances of apparent precognition, cases of spontaneous healing that defied medical explanation, technological malfunctions that seemed to involve violations of causality. Most intriguingly, Laszlo had identified historical periods when temporal elasticity appeared to have been much higher than normal, lasting for months or years. These periods corresponded to eras of rapid technological and cultural advancement: the Renaissance, the Scientific Revolution, the early 20th century period that saw the development of quantum mechanics and relativity theory. "I believe," Laszlo said on their final evening together, "that we are entering another such period. The 333-second cycle that you have detected represents a strengthening of temporal currents that may lead to significant changes in the nature of reality itself. The coherence field is not just a scientific curiosity, it may be the harbinger of a transformation in how consciousness interacts with the physical world." Elena returned to Chile, with her understanding of the mystery fundamentally changed.
The coherence field wasn't just influencing various physical phenomena, it appeared to be creating conditions in which the normal boundaries between mind and matter, cause and effect, past and future, became more permeable. But even Laszlo's insights couldn't explain the ultimate origin of the field or predict what would happen as its influence continued to strengthen. For those answers, Elena would need to venture even further outside conventional science into realms where quantum mechanics met consciousness research and ancient wisdom traditions intersected with cutting-edge physics. Back in the Atacama Desert, Elena found that her discovery had taken on a life of its own. Word of the coherence field had spread through the global physics community, generating both intense interest and heated skepticism. While some researchers were eager to collaborate in understanding the phenomenon, others dismissed it as a combination of measurement error and wishful thinking. Amanda Reeves from Princeton University was among the skeptics, until she tried to replicate Elena's findings using the gravitational wave detector at Hanford. Amanda was known for her rigorous experimental protocols and her ability to identify sources of systematic error that other researchers missed. If anyone could debunk the coherence field, it would be her. Instead, Amanda found herself becoming one of its most dedicated investigators. Not only did she confirm Elena's observations, but her more sophisticated analysis techniques revealed additional structure in the signal that Elena had missed. The 333-second cycle was actually composed of multiple harmonic frequencies, creating a complex temporal symphony that seemed to encode information. It's not just a simple oscillation, Amanda explained during a video conference with Elena and the growing network of coherence field researchers. The signal has harmonic content that varies in predictable patterns. It's almost as if the field is carrying some kind of encoded message, though I have no idea what language it might be written in. Amanda's analysis revealed that the coherence field exhibited what physicists call non-local correlations, characteristics that appeared instantaneously at widely separated locations, suggesting that the field operated outside conventional space-time constraints. Changes in the field's intensity detected in Chile would appear simultaneously in detectors in Japan, Italy, and Louisiana, with no apparent signal propagation time. This non-local behavior reminded Elena of quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where particles can remain connected across arbitrary distances, sharing information instantaneously regardless of the space between them. But quantum entanglement typically worked only with individual particles or small systems, not with macroscopic phenomena that could influence entire laboratory experiments around the world. The connection to quantum mechanics led Elena to Dr. Roger Penrose, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist known for his unconventional theories about consciousness and quantum mechanics. Penrose had long argued that human consciousness might arise from quantum processes in the brain, a controversial idea that mainstream neuroscience had largely rejected. But when Amanda shared her analysis of the coherence field's harmonic structure with Penrose, the elderly physicist became intensely interested. The frequency patterns he realized bore a striking resemblance to theoretical predictions from his orchestrated objective reduction (OR theory, a model that proposed consciousness emerged from quantum computations in cellular structures called microtubules. The harmonic ratios you've detected, Penrose told Elena during a phone call from Oxford, match the frequency relationships that OR predicts should exist between quantum coherent states in neural microtubules. If your coherence field is somehow resonating with quantum processes in consciousness, it might explain why meditation practitioners are showing synchronized brain activity with the 333-second cycle. This connection led Elena to Dr. Anirban Bandyopadhyay, a quantum physicist at the National Institute for Materials Science in Japan, who had been conducting experiments on microtubule quantum coherence for over a decade. Dr. Bandyopadhyay had built sophisticated equipment capable of detecting quantum resonances in biological systems, and his recent experiments had revealed something extraordinary. We have discovered that microtubules in human neurons can maintain quantum coherence for much longer periods than previously thought possible. Dr. Bandyopadhyay explained during a virtual laboratory tour that Elena watched from her Chilean control room. Under normal conditions, Quantum coherence in warm biological systems should collapse within picoseconds, but we are detecting coherent states that persist for minutes, sometimes hours. The implications were staggering. If neural microtubules could maintain quantum coherence for extended periods, it provided a potential physical mechanism for consciousness to access quantum information processing capabilities. The human brain might literally be a quantum computer, capable of computational tasks that classical systems could never achieve. But what made Dr. Bandiopatier's results even more intriguing was their temporal structure. The periods of extended quantum coherence in neural microtubules followed distinct patterns, with peak coherence occurring in regular cycles. When Elena compared his data to her gravitational wave measurements, the correlation was unmistakable. Neural quantum coherence was synchronized with the 333-second rhythm of the coherence field. It appears, Dr. Bandiopatier said with barely contained excitement, that your coherence field is creating conditions that allow quantum states in biological systems to remain stable far longer than conventional physics would predict. During peak phases of the cycle, the normal environmental decoherence that destroys quantum states is somehow suppressed. This led to a collaboration with Dr. Dean Radin, a researcher at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who had been studying the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics for decades. Radin had conducted thousands of experiments investigating whether human consciousness could influence quantum systems directly, and his results consistently showed small but statistically significant effects that conventional science couldn't explain. When Dr. Radin began correlating his experimental results with Elena's coherence field data, he discovered that the consciousness quantum interaction effects he had been measuring were much stronger during peak phases of the 333-second cycle. During these windows, human intention seemed to influence quantum random number generators, quantum tunnel diodes, and other quantum systems with effect sizes much larger than typically observed. We're seeing influence coefficients that are 3 to 5 times larger during coherence field peaks, Dr. Radin reported. It's as if consciousness gains temporary access to enhanced quantum information processing capabilities when the field is at maximum intensity. Elena found herself at the center of a new kind of scientific revolution, one that bridged the gap between objective physical phenomena and subjective conscious experience. The coherence field wasn't just affecting laboratory equipment and exotic materials. It was apparently creating conditions in which human consciousness could interact with quantum systems in ways that normal physics considered impossible. But the most extraordinary discovery was yet to come, and it would emerge from an unexpected source. A group of indigenous shamans in the Amazon rainforest, who had been working with plant medicines for thousands of years, developing technologies of consciousness that Western science was only beginning to understand. Dr. Maria Santos had never expected her ethnobotanical research to intersect with quantum physics. As an anthropologist studying traditional healing practices among indigenous communities in the Peruvian Amazon, her work focused on documenting knowledge systems that had been developed over millennia, without any influence from Western science. But when she heard about Elena's coherence field through academic networks, she realized that her own research might be connected to these mysterious quantum phenomena. Maria had spent the past 15 years working with various indigenous groups, learning about their sophisticated understanding of plant medicines and altered states of consciousness. She had participated in hundreds of ayahuasca ceremonies, peyote rituals, and other traditional practices, always as a respectful observer documenting the healing techniques and cosmological insights that emerged from these experiences. What had struck her most profoundly was the consistency of certain types of knowledge that emerged during these altered states. People from completely different cultural backgrounds, participating in ceremonies thousands of miles apart, would often report remarkably similar insights about the fundamental nature of reality. They described a universe that was fundamentally conscious, interconnected in ways that transcended normal spatial and temporal boundaries. But Maria's scientific training had made her cautious about making too much of these reports. Altered states of consciousness, while fascinating and potentially therapeutic, didn't necessarily provide reliable information about objective reality.
The human brain was capable of generating extremely convincing but entirely imaginary experiences under the influence of psychoactive compounds. However, when she began correlating the timing of ceremonial experiences with Elena's coherence field data, she discovered something that challenged her assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and objective reality. I've been tracking the timing of what I call breakthrough experiences
during ayahuasca ceremonies for the past 3 years, Maria explained during a satellite phone call from a research station in the Ucayali region of Peru. These are moments when participants report accessing what they describe as universal knowledge, insights that seem to come from outside their personal experience, and often prove to be accurate information they couldn't have known through normal means. Maria had documented dozens of cases where ceremony participants had reported detailed information about distant events, made accurate predictions about future occurrences, or demonstrated knowledge of complex scientific concepts they had never studied. While she couldn't rule out coincidence or unconscious inference in individual cases, the overall pattern was too consistent to dismiss. What I found when I compared my timing data to your coherence field measurements, Maria continued, is that these breakthrough experiences almost always occur during peak phases of the 333-second cycle. The correlation is so strong that I can now predict with about 80% accuracy when someone in ceremony will have one of these extraordinary experiences. Elena was intrigued but puzzled. How would a quantum field influence the effects of plant medicines? That's where it gets really interesting, Maria replied. I've been working with Dr. Dennis McKenna, Terence McKenna's brother, who has been studying the neurochemistry of ayahuasca for decades. Dennis thinks that the active compounds in these plants, particularly DMT, might create conditions in the brain that enhance sensitivity to quantum fields. Dr. Dennis McKenna had indeed been investigating the intersection of psychedelic neurochemistry and quantum consciousness for years. His research suggested that compounds like DMT, psilocybin and mescaline might work not just by binding to neurotransmitter receptors, but by creating quantum coherent states in neural networks that allowed consciousness to access information processing capabilities normally unavailable to the classical brain. Plant medicines seem to dissolve the boundaries between classical and quantum neural processing, Dennis explained during a 3-way conference call with Elena and Maria. During peak psychedelic experiences, the brain appears to enter quantum superposition states that allow access to non-local information fields. If your coherence field strengthens quantum coherence generally, it would amplify these effects dramatically. This led to a remarkable collaboration between Elena's gravitational wave physics, Maria's ethnobotanical research, and Dennis's psychedelic neuroscience. They designed experiments to test whether the coherence field influenced the effects of plant medicines in measurable ways. Working with indigenous healers who had been conducting ceremonies for decades, they began monitoring both the electromagnetic activity in ceremony participants' brains and the local gravitational wave signatures during ayahuasca rituals. What they found exceeded their wildest expectations. During peak phases of the coherence field, ceremony participants showed dramatically enhanced neural coherence across wide areas of the brain. EEG measurements revealed synchronized gamma wave activity that persisted for much longer periods than typically observed, even in experienced meditators. Most remarkably, the neural synchronization patterns appeared to be phase-locked with the 333-second rhythm of the coherence field itself. It's as if the coherence field is entraining human neural activity to its own rhythm, Dennis observed. During field peaks, the brain becomes a quantum antenna, capable of receiving information from non-local sources. But the most extraordinary discovery emerged when they compared the content of insights reported during high coherence ceremonies with independent sources of information. Participants frequently described accurate details about distant locations they had never visited, correctly predicted personal events in other ceremony participants' lives, and demonstrated understanding of complex scientific concepts that matched cutting-edge research they couldn't have accessed through normal means. In one particularly striking case, A ceremony participant with no background in physics provided a detailed description of gravitational wave detection methods that precisely matched classified technical procedures at LIGO facilities. The information was so accurate and complete that Elena initially suspected a security breach, until she verified that the participant had no possible access to the information through conventional channels. We're documenting what appears to be direct access to a universal information field, Maria reported. During peak coherence phases, consciousness seems to connect to a level of reality where all information is accessible simultaneously. This led Elena to realize that the coherence field might not just be a physical phenomenon, it might be the mechanism through which consciousness interfaces with the quantum substrate of reality itself. The 333-second rhythm might represent a carrier wave that allows localized consciousness to access the non-local information field that quantum mechanics suggests underlies all physical phenomena. But even these extraordinary discoveries couldn't prepare Elena for what she would learn next, when she encountered research suggesting that the coherence field might not be naturally occurring at all, but rather the result of an advanced technology that had been operating on Earth for far longer than human civilization had existed. Dr. James Fletcher had been analyzing deep geological data for oil exploration companies for 25 years, developing increasingly sophisticated techniques for interpreting seismic surveys and ground-penetrating radar results. His work required him to understand how various natural phenomena could create patterns in underground rock formations, and he had become expert at distinguishing between natural geological processes and artificial structures. It was this expertise that led him to notice something unusual in data from archaeological surveys around ancient sites in Egypt, Peru, and Cambodia. The ground-penetrating radar signatures showed evidence of structures that appeared to extend much deeper underground than the surface monuments suggested. And these buried structures exhibited regular geometric patterns that didn't match any known natural geological processes. When James learned about Elena's coherence field research through professional networks, he realized that the timing patterns he had detected in geological data might be connected to the 333-second cycle. Ancient structures around the world seem to have been built at locations where underground rock formations exhibited resonant properties that matched the coherence field frequency. I've been analyzing subsurface data from sites like the Great Pyramid, Machu Picchu, and Angkor Wat, James explained during a presentation to Elena's growing research network. These locations sit on top of natural rock formations that act as acoustic resonators for extremely low-frequency vibrations. The geometry is too perfect to be coincidental. These sites were deliberately chosen for their resonant properties. James's data revealed that ancient civilizations had possessed sophisticated understanding of what he called geological harmonics, the way that certain rock formations could amplify and focus low-frequency waves. The megalithic structures built at these sites weren't just impressive architecture. They were components of what appeared to be a global network of resonant systems. The stone chambers inside the Great Pyramid, the precisely cut granite boxes at Saqqara, the acoustic properties of structures at Newgrange, they're all tuned to the same frequencies that your coherence field exhibits. James continued. It's as if ancient builders understood the existence of this field and created technologies to interact with it. This led Elena to collaborate with Dr. Christopher Dunn, an engineer who had been studying the technical aspects of ancient Egyptian construction for decades. Dunn had previously proposed that the Great Pyramid might have functioned as some kind of power plant or energy device, based on his analysis of its acoustic properties and internal geometry. The resonant characteristics of the King's Chamber match the frequency signature of your coherence field almost exactly, Dunn told Elena during a visit to the LIGO facility in Chile. The chamber dimensions, the type of granite used, even the positioning of the sarcophagus, everything is optimized to create standing wave patterns at specific frequencies. Dunn's engineering analysis revealed that ancient sites around the world had been designed with an understanding of resonance phenomena that modern science was only beginning to appreciate. The builders had used precise measurements, specific materials, and careful acoustic engineering to create structures that could detect, amplify, and possibly generate the same types of low-frequency waves that Elena was measuring with gravitational wave detectors. But the implications went far beyond ancient engineering knowledge. If prehistoric civilizations had possessed the ability to detect and work with the coherence field, it suggested that the field itself might not be a recently emerged phenomenon. It might have been influencing human development for thousands of years, possibly shaping the evolution of consciousness and technological capability throughout history. This hypothesis gained support from Dr. Robert Bauval, the Egyptologist who had identified the correlation between the positions of the Giza pyramids and the stars of Orion's belt. When Bauval analyzed the astronomical alignments of ancient sites in the context of Elena's coherence field data, he discovered that many megalithic structures had been oriented not just to stellar positions but to maximize their resonance with geological formations during specific time periods. The builders of these monuments understood something about cyclical variations in whatever field or force they were working with. Bauval explained, the alignments suggest they were tracking long-term changes in field intensity over periods of thousands of years. Elena began to see a pattern that spanned millennia. Ancient civilizations had detected the coherence field using Stone Age technology, built monuments to interact with it, and apparently used it to access enhanced states of consciousness and advanced knowledge. The field itself exhibited cycles on multiple time scales, the 333-second rhythm that modern instruments could detect, but also longer cycles that operated over years, centuries, and millennia. But the most startling discovery came when Elena analyzed very long-term variations in the field intensity using data that extended back through decades of gravitational wave observations. The 333-second cycle was embedded within longer rhythms that operated on timescales of months and years, and these longer cycles appeared to be accelerating, suggesting that the field was building towards some kind of culmination event. The data suggests we're approaching a maximum in a cycle that operates over thousands of years, Elena reported to an emergency meeting of coherence field researchers. If the patterns we're seeing hold, we may be entering a period of unprecedented field intensity within the next few years. The implications were profound. If the coherence field had influenced human development throughout history, creating conditions that allowed for technological and cultural breakthroughs during previous maxima, humanity might be approaching another such period. The enhanced consciousness effects that researchers had been documenting might represent early signs of a transformation in the relationship between mind and matter that could reshape civilization itself. But Elena's investigation had also revealed something troubling. The accelerating field intensity wasn't following the gradual patterns that characterized natural cycles. The mathematical models suggested that something had been actively amplifying the field, possibly for decades or centuries, driving it toward an artificial maximum that could have unpredictable consequences. This led her to the most disturbing possibility of all: the coherence field might not be naturally occurring, but rather the result of a technology that had been operating in secret, using humanity as unwitting test subjects in an experiment whose ultimate purpose remained hidden. Dr. Elizabeth Warren had spent her career in the shadows, working on classified projects that pushed the boundaries of physics into realms that mainstream science wasn't ready to acknowledge. As a contractor for various defense agencies, she had investigated everything from anti-gravity propulsion systems to consciousness-based information-gathering techniques. When Elena's research began circulating through certain private networks, Elizabeth recognized patterns that connected to projects she had worked on decades earlier. The phone call came to Elena on a secure line at 2 a.m. Chilean time. The voice was female, professional, and carefully neutral in a way that suggested intelligence community training. Dr. Vasquez, my name is Dr. Warren. I work for organizations that prefer not to be identified, but I believe you and I need to talk. Your coherence field research has intersected with classified programs that have been operating for longer than you might imagine. Elena was immediately suspicious. She had been careful to keep her research in the public domain,
sharing data openly with international collaborators and avoiding anything that might have military applications. But she was also curious about what connection her purely academic research might have to classified projects. What kind of programs? Elena asked. Projects that began in the 1940s, investigating the potential military applications of what were then called psychic phenomena. Elizabeth replied. Over the decades, these programs evolved to focus on the technological enhancement of human consciousness and the development of systems that could influence quantum processes at a distance. Elizabeth explained that various government agencies had been studying the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics since shortly after World War II. Programs with code names like Stargate, Grill Flame, and others had investigated whether human consciousness could access non-local information or influence physical systems through quantum mechanical pathways. The early research was largely unsuccessful, Elizabeth continued, but in the 1980s, we began to understand that consciousness quantum interactions might be enhanced by specific electromagnetic field configurations. We started developing technology to create what we called coherence amplification fields, artificially generated conditions that would strengthen quantum coherence effects. Elena felt a chill of recognition. Are you saying that the coherence field I've detected is artificially generated? Not entirely artificial, Elizabeth replied. There appears to be a natural component, a background field that has existed throughout Earth's history, but our technology has been amplifying this natural field for nearly 40 years, gradually increasing its intensity to study the effects on human consciousness and quantum systems. The revelation was staggering. Elena's discovery of the coherence field wasn't the identification of a new natural phenomenon, but rather the detection of a decades-long classified experiment that had been conducted without public knowledge or consent. The 333-second rhythm, the global synchronization, the effects on quantum materials and consciousness, all of it might be the result of secret technology that had been influencing human development for generations. The reason I'm contacting you, Elizabeth continued, is that our monitoring systems indicate the field intensity is approaching levels that we never intended to reach. The amplification appears to have triggered some kind of runaway feedback effect. The field is strengthening itself, and we're no longer able to control or shut down the process. Elena spent the next several hours on encrypted calls with Elizabeth, learning about technologies that sounded like science fiction but were apparently operational realities. Arrays of specialized generators buried at carefully chosen locations around the world, designed to create standing wave patterns that could influence quantum processes across continental distances. Computer systems that used quantum coherence effects to perform calculations that classical systems couldn't handle. And most disturbing of all, evidence that the enhanced coherence effects were beginning to produce unintended consequences. We're seeing spontaneous manifestation of phenomena that should be impossible according to conventional physics, Elizabeth explained. Materials that appear and disappear without traceable origins, energy systems that produce more output than input, and most concerning, individuals who seem to be developing capabilities that we can only describe as psychic or paranormal. Elizabeth's revelations forced Elena to reconsider everything she thought she understood about her research. The coherence field wasn't just a fascinating scientific mystery. It was apparently the result of a covert technology that had been manipulating human consciousness for decades, but the technology had exceeded its original parameters, and the effects were accelerating beyond anyone's ability to predict or control. But even this revelation couldn't prepare Elena for what she would learn next, that the secret amplification technology might itself be based on reverse-engineered systems of non-human origin, and that the coherence field was apparently triggering responses from sources that extended far beyond Earth. Dr. Michael Harrison had been monitoring radio telescope data for signals of non-terrestrial origin since 1987,
as part of both official SETI programs and privately funded research projects. His work had taught him to distinguish between the countless sources of electromagnetic noise that filled the radio spectrum and the much rarer signals that might indicate intelligent origin. But in the months following Elena's discovery of the coherence field, Michael began detecting radio signatures that didn't fit any known categories. "I'm seeing structured signals that appear to be responses to your coherence field oscillations," Michael explained during an encrypted video conference with Elena and Elizabeth. "When the field reaches peak intensity, we detect radio bursts from locations in space that show no visible electromagnetic sources. It's as if the coherence field is triggering communication attempts from technologies we can't see." The signals Michael was detecting exhibited characteristics that suggested artificial origin, precise timing relationships, mathematical harmonic structures, and modulation patterns that didn't match any known natural radio sources. Most intriguingly, the signals appeared to be synchronized with the 333-second rhythm of the coherence field, as if they were responses to some kind of broadcast signal. "The pattern suggests a communication protocol," Michael continued. "The coherence field pulses, and approximately 47 seconds later, the light travel time to a distance of about 14 million kilometers. We detect structured radio responses. Whatever is generating these signals is positioned somewhere between Earth and Mars, and it's actively monitoring the coherence field." Elizabeth confirmed that classified monitoring systems had detected similar anomalies, but at much higher levels of sophistication than public radio telescopes could achieve. "Our deep space surveillance networks have identified multiple sources of what appear to be artificial signals, all responding to coherence field fluctuations. The sources are moving in patterns that suggest they're under intelligent control." Elena found herself confronting the possibility that her scientific investigation had uncovered evidence of non-human intelligence actively monitoring Earth. The coherence field wasn't just influencing quantum systems and human consciousness. It was apparently functioning as an unintended communication beacon that was attracting attention from technologies of unknown origin. "There's more," Elizabeth continued. "Analysis of the response signals suggests they contain encoded information. We've been working with cryptographic specialists and mathematicians to decode the content, and the preliminary results are extraordinary." The encoded information, Elizabeth explained, appeared to consist of advanced scientific and technological knowledge presented in mathematical languages that human science was only beginning to understand. Theoretical frameworks for manipulating spacetime geometry, blueprints for devices that could generate unlimited energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations, and most remarkably, detailed maps of what appeared to be technological installations throughout the solar system. "The information suggests that Earth has been under observation for much longer than we realized," Elizabeth said. "The coherence field amplification technology that we developed may have been based on incomplete understanding of artifacts that have been influencing human development for thousands of years." Elena realized that her investigation had led her to the edge of a revelation that would transform humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The coherence field wasn't just an interesting quantum phenomenon, it was apparently part of a communication and monitoring system that connected Earth to a broader technological civilization. But the most disturbing aspect of the situation was that the runaway amplification of the coherence field was apparently triggering active responses from these non-human technologies. The increase in field intensity wasn't just affecting quantum systems on Earth. It was being interpreted as some kind of signal or beacon that was prompting increasingly direct interventions. "We're seeing physical manifestations now," Elizabeth admitted. "Unidentified craft appearing in restricted airspace, materials with properties that exceed our understanding of physics, and individuals reporting direct contact experiences that correlate precisely with coherence field intensity peaks." Elena found herself at the center of a scenario that transcended all her expectations when she first detected the mysterious 333-second rhythm.
What had begun as a scientific investigation of gravitational wave anomalies had evolved into first contact with non-human intelligence, mediated by quantum fields that connected consciousness, matter, and information in ways that challenged the foundations of human understanding. But the most extraordinary revelations were still to come, as Elena prepared to learn that the coherence field might not just be facilitating communication with non-human intelligence, but actually serving as the activation mechanism for dormant technologies that had been embedded within Earth's biosphere for millions of years.